Well, we have an update tonight on a story we first brought you last April about the $23 million renovation project underway at the former Wood and Brooks factory in Tonawanda. Our partners at Investigative Post reported on the $17 million in public subsidies that developers of the project received to turn the vacant factory into luxury apartments. Now they are shining light on loopholes in the law that allow developers to avoid complying with New York's prevailing wage law. And joining me live in studio is J. Dale Shoemaker from Investigative Post. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
You first told us about millions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies for these developers. They've used that money to actually hire union labor, but now the union workers are basically protesting that project. Why are they crying foul?
So what's going on here is that in 2020, there was a new law passed under the Cuomo administration with New York's prevailing wage law. What that new law says is that if a private construction project like this one costs more than $5 million, and if more than 30% of that cost is made up in subsidies, whether like property tax breaks, sales tax breaks, other tax breaks, then the developer has to pay prevailing wage, which is based on union rates, more or less. In this case, however, there's a loophole in the law. The loophole says that if you get certain tax subsidies, such as brownfield remediation tax credits, historic preservation tax credits, or something like that, then the prevailing wage requirement no longer applies. And so the unions, they helped in Albany get this law passed. However, now they realize that this developer isn't required to pay prevailing wage, so they protested on Wednesday.
So you kind of talked about that loophole and how it works, but how do you avoid it?
So to avoid this loophole, there is a new public subsidy board that was established, and this is under the Department of Labor in Albany, and they are kind of the adjudicators of this. Now, the union, District Council 4, they're the IUPAT, the painters union. They actually took a complaint to the public subsidy board in December and said, hey, we think that this project got way too many subsidies. We think you should apply prevailing wage law. And the public subsidy board ruled against them. They said, no, this developer does not have to pay public subsidy. And so now the unions are going public and saying there's a huge loophole in this law and we need to tighten that up.
I'm sure they're not the only ones, right? It's probably other companies and other projects that you're probably looking at too that are dealing with this loophole. That's why it's a loophole, right? And people know how to use it.
Yeah, around the state so far we've seen 10 other projects that the public subsidy board has ruled on that they said, well, loophole applies here, you don't have to pay prevailing wage.
What's the next step here?
So the next step is that Rochester Assemblyman Harry Bronson, he's the chairman of the Labor Committee in the Assembly, he has a bill that would strengthen some of the brownfield subsidy rules as well as close this prevailing wage loophole. So the unions are trying to get behind there. A union member with LIUNA, the laborers union, told me that they're planning to have similar rallies like they had on Wednesday around the state, highlighting similar projects like this as a way to raise public awareness of this loophole and hopefully get Bronson's bill passed this spring.
Very interesting, J. Dale. And the other thing I'm wondering, do you think these workers will now start talking about walking off the job?
I don't know if we're at that point yet because the developer has hired a mix of both union work and non-union work. And so the union members, they might get to a point where they're walking off the job, but you have another, segment of workers there who are not unionized. And if they walk off the job, they probably just lose their jobs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure you're going to stay on top of this to see exactly what's going to come up next. Thanks so much for being with us. This is J. Dale Shoemaker. He is with our partners at Investigative Post. Of course, if you want to see his full story, there is a link right now on WGRZ.com. All you have to do is look under the Investigative Post tab. We want